Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an honour this morning to follow up on our leader's speech about our Opposition Day motion today. That is calling on the Liberals, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois to support common sense. After 8 years of this Prime Minister and the NDP-Liberal coalition, Canadians by the millions are getting increasingly frustrated at the out-of-control tax increases under this Prime Minister. Let me give you an example, Mr. Speaker. $27,571.29. That is on an invoice from Rutter's Elevators. I was speaking to Michael Obey in Chesterville yesterday and again this morning. That is the carbon tax bill, the line on the bill for drawing at their elevator for one farm in Chesterville, Ontario last year. $27,000 just in carbon taxes. Canadians believe that is getting absurd. But the worst is yet to come. On April 1st, the carbon tax is going to increase by 23%. And the Prime Minister and the NDP, their coalition partners together, they are going to quadruple the carbon tax in the coming years. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are dumbfounded at the fact that this Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and their government believe putting a $100,000 carbon tax bill for one farm alone is not going to increase the cost of food and inflation in this country. Nobody believes it. When just again this week, the Finance Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister go out and say the carbon tax is revenue neutral. No wonder why we can't balance the budget in this country under their watch. They can't do basic math and economics to understand that. The Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed the impact that it's going to have on farmers. $1 billion in carbon taxes are coming under this current plan and the continued carbon tax increases to farmers in the coming years. Nobody believes that you can add $1 billion in taxes to the bills of Canadian farmers and not expect food prices, the cost of living, and the cost of doing business in this country to go up. That doesn't even include, Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax on trucking. My family, I'm proud of my father Ed, now happily retired from Jet Express in South Mountain, Ontario. We were in the trucking business for years. You can't put 61 cents a litre on the price of gas in the transportation business and not have that drive up the cost of food, of everything that Canadians buy. Everything has to be shipped and trucked in this country, and again, driving up the cost. Canadians are tired, and they've had enough of these tax increases. So we have our common sense Conservative motion here today that builds on our 4 priorities: axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. And Mr. Speaker, that is resonating because that is what Conservative members heard in every part of the country once again over the Christmas recess and holidays out and about in our community. And you talk about out of touch. I want people to picture this for a second if they can. We go home back to our ridings and we go into Christmas open houses and we're going out to public events and we're dropping by. I want you to picture a Liberal MP and just how out of touch they are. Apparently, they went home and they went out to the local Tim Hortons coffee shop to grab a coffee and shoot the breeze with people in Avalon, rural Newfoundland. They come back, Mr. Speaker, to Ottawa, and after weeks of feedback, the Prime Minister had a great idea this week. They said, we've heard the message about the carbon tax loud and clear. They don't like the name of it, Mr. Speaker. Their idea, after going back and hearing from Canadians apparently, was it wasn't the fact that the carbon tax is going to quadruple, it wasn't the fact that it's driving up the cost, it wasn't the fact they're adding $1 billion in taxes to Canadian farmers in the coming years. It's the fact that maybe Canadians just don't like the name of the carbon tax. Out of touch. On this side of the aisle, the motion is clear. On April the 1st, the carbon tax is going to increase by 23% as part of that plan to quadruple the carbon tax from its current rate right now. If Canadians think it's bad now, just wait until year after year after year it gets to the totals in their plans. They may not even be done after that. There is no part of this country that is not impacted negatively from the failed carbon tax, and it has been a failure. Emissions are not going down, they are going up. And the cost of living and the cost of doing business is skyrocketing at rates like we've never seen before. But I want to point out a couple points in this country. Just this week, CTV News had an article, the headline, 40% of Nova Scotia households struggle to pay their electricity bill. They still plan to quadruple the carbon tax and drive the bills up even further. But the part of the country I would like to highlight today, Mr. Speaker, are the good people in Northern Ontario, who for years have overwhelmingly elected many Liberal and NDP MPs to go to Ottawa, and now they're seeing week by week, month by month, budget by budget, just how out of touch their Liberal and NDP MPs have been. It was very interesting here, and I want to call out the hypocrisy, particularly of the NDP. They always talk a big, tough game. They yell and they do all their things, whether it be a committee or in question period, and they always claim they have these great ideas, and they vote, and they do all these things to make it look like they're fighting on behalf of folks, particularly in Northern Ontario. At the end of the day, when the budget comes, Mr. Speaker, the NDP are just as complicit as the Liberals are in driving up the carbon tax. In hypocrisy, I have to call out the member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing, an NDP MP that goes on the record and says, quote, about the carbon tax, quote, I think it's a black eye for the Liberals for what they have done. Excuse me, to the NDP, they have voted with the Liberals every single time, and they are going to quadruple. The only reason Canadians aren't having a choice right now is because the NDP keeps propping them up time and time again. And, Mr. Speaker, I think what is important here, too, is that they go and they say one thing back in their ridings, and then they come to Ottawa and they vote a completely different way. Well, what we say is rent's up, gas is up, the carbon tax is up, housing costs are up, and for the NDP, time's up. Canadians, particularly in Northern Ontario, aren't buying it anymore. And I think of my favorite part, one of my favorite parts is the NDP member from Timmins, James Bay, who gets triggered. I've had the honor of, I'm glad that he's here this morning, glad that at the
Honourable Member Kingston of the Islands. And I did catch that. We can't refer to whether someone is here or not, and I think the Honourable Member knows that. The Honourable Member for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Timmins, James Bay, what I can say is, when I visited Timmins last year, and when our Conservative leader visited Timmins time and time again, first of all, they never see or hear from their NDP MP, first of all, but just how out of touch the NDP has come, how they've sold out working families, particularly in Northern Ontario, in Timmins, James Bay, is the fact they continue to prop this Liberal government up. It was just in the news last week, the Daily Press up in Timmins. It was the airport manager of the Victor M. Power Airport that said he has a serious concern for the rising cost of living in this country. And I'm going to quote the manager here. Quote, we're burning hundreds and hundreds of liters of fuel, and that price is going to go up a huge amount. That cost gets passed on to the traveling public right out of Timmins. So my budget is going through the roof in the next couple of years. My focus is running the business of the airport. I need to do something to make sure people can afford to fly and not have to pay $800 seats just to go to Toronto. That is because carbon taxes are driving up the cost of living in Northern Ontario. It gets cold in Northern Ontario. To heat your home, you need to have heat. They should not be penalized for doing that. They have to drive. If you're going from Timmins to Sault Ste. Marie or Sudbury or North Bay or Timmins or Kapuskasing or Hearst or any point in between, there's no subway. The Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister just hops on the subway. Well, I've been up there a few times in Northern Ontario. I found a Subway restaurant, but haven't found the subway yet that she suggests people in Northern Ontario can just do. So, Mr. Speaker, the motion we have is clear. Our position as Canadian Conservatives is clear as well. We will axe the tax entirely on everything for good. The Prime Minister is playing games with Bill C-234 and giving an exemption or a carve-out to farmers to save $1 billion. They won't go for that. They're playing games in the Senate and now here in the House. Now they have the opportunity to go on the record. They don't have to increase the carbon tax again on April the 1st. It is time to cancel the increase and give Canadians some much-needed relief after 8 years of this Prime Minister and his NDP partners.